They called it a transition celebration, but I knew a funeral dirge when I heard one, complete with Costco sheet cake and lukewarm Diet Coke. I was the corpse, still breathing. My name tag said Marla Hayes, Systems Compliance, but that Monday morning it might as well have read Dead Woman Walking. I'd spent 19 years keeping that damn company clean, through 6 rebrands, 4 CEOs, one embezzlement scandal, involving a CFO who now sells keto cookies on Instagram. And yet there I was, standing in a gray cubicle graveyard, listening to Lexi Vane, the 31-year-old CTO who wore blazers like armor and used words like synergy as weapons, tell the room how legacy roles are sunsetting to make space for a digitally native workforce. Digitally native, my ass. These kids needed a tutorial to open a PDF. I sat through the whole spiel with the expression of a woman trying not to throw up in a church pew. Lexi clicked through her pastel PowerPoint, filled with stock photos of suspiciously happy millennials pretending to work, and made eye contact with me exactly once. She smiled, all buttocks and bleach, then quickly looked away like I might glitch her aura. They thought I was done, that my silence was surrender. A 52-year-old compliance officer with a limp and a garden club addiction would just take her severance, fade into suburbia, and die between episodes of Wheel of Fortune. But see, here's the thing about old systems. We may look clunky, but we remember everything. While Lexi floated buzzwords like helium balloons, I was dragging folders off shared drives like I was packing for the Gotham apocalypse. Every falsified audit, every ghost invoice, every document marked internal eyes only that smelled like white-collar crime marinated in plausible deniability, I copied them. Quietly, consistently, while the new interns posted Slack emojis and asked what a fax machine was. And hey, before I go on, a quick side note from the lady with nothing left to lose. 97% of you listening to this haven't hit the subscribe button. Do it. It doesn't cost you anything. It tells the team you actually give a damn. And let me tell you, after 20 years in corporate hell, getting noticed is a miracle worth fighting for. Back to the story. Lexi didn't fire me. Oh no, that'd be actionable. Instead, she let HR do it via voluntary exit options, a phrase so twisted it belongs in a Hallmark card for war criminals. I got a formal invitation to a legacy roundtable to celebrate the wisdom of our tenured professionals. He sat me next to Kyle from App Integration, a child whose greatest career achievement was syncing Slack with our espresso machine. Kyle called me ma'am. I nearly stabbed him with a biodegradable fork. The next morning, my company laptop greeted me with a cheerful banner. Retirement pathways tailored just for you. I clicked decline. The page auto-redirected to the same page. I clicked decline again. It smiled. So did I. I started encrypting my files. I wasn't reckless. I didn't want revenge, not yet. I just wanted insurance. Something to prove I hadn't imagined the fraud, something to remind the universe I existed. They gave me a cardboard box in 2 weeks. I took one. I packed slowly. Every stapler, every faded memo, every sarcastic sticky note I'd ever left myself. Don't trust Jerry in finance. He microwaves tuna into the box. But the last thing I placed inside was different. It was a dented steel lunchbox. Used to belong to my dad when he worked the GM plant in Lorraine. I'd brought it in during the 2020 layoffs as a joke, old school meets new normal. It had lived under my desk since. Nobody thought twice about it, not even the new security team Lexi hired, the kind that wears black polos, earpieces, and looks like they failed out of TSA school. That lunchbox now held a single thumb drive, labeled insurance. I didn't even flinch when I slid it in. Let Lexi laugh at her jokes. Let them call me outdated. I'd already scheduled the first backup to route home. The second would follow if anyone tried to crack the files. I didn't want to blow up the company. I just wanted to be able to look in the mirror and not feel like a walking doormat in orthopedic shoes. But deep down, a part of me hoped someone would try. 'Cause that's the thing about building systems no one bothers to understand. When they break, no one knows how to stop the cascade. And I'd spent 19 years building theirs. The legacy celebration was held in Conference Room B, the one that always smelled faintly like mildew and broken promises. Someone had printed my face on a sheet cake using edible ink that gave me jaundice. The frosting read, "Thanks for the decades, Marla." Like they couldn't remember how many there actually were. HR sent Rebecca, their people operations specialist, which I guess is corporate for professional neck stabber. She wore a pink blazer and smiled like she practiced in a mirror every morning just to hide her dead eyes. "We just want to honor the impact you've had," she chirped. "You were foundational, like asbestos, like lead paint, like the outdated wiring that gets blamed when the building burns down." I asked her, between bites of stale spinach pinwheels, why 3 separate compliance audits from 2022 had completely different vendor numbers for the same cybersecurity firm. She blinked at me like I'd just spoken Klingon. "Oh, I'm sure that was just an accounting oversight," she said, already motioning for the intern to dim the lights for the slideshow. The slideshow. 32 slides of my face and name misspelled in various fonts. Group photo from 2008 where someone cropped out my ex-husband but left in his arm. One quote from Lexi Vane herself. Marla's commitment to documentation has been inspiring. Translation, she kept receipts. We hated it. The worst part? I smiled. Sat there clapping along while everyone cheered and pretended they hadn't been slowly ghosting me since Lexi took over. No mention of the months I stayed late without clocking overtime, of how I restructured the internal audit template after the ransomware scare, or how I personally flagged a phishing attempt that would have tanked procurement. But they remembered the time I wore two different shoes by mistake and made it a meme. Afterward, I shuffled back to my cubicle, still mine for 3 more days, and sat down like my bones had betrayed me. Opened my drawer, pulled out the thumb drive again. Labeled, insurance. I held it in my palm like it was radioactive. Maybe it was. Maybe it would detonate my life. Maybe I was just bitter. Maybe Lexi had cleaned up the mess and I was chasing shadows from a different era. I thought about the spreadsheets, the weird double-billed invoices, the deleted Slack messages I caught in the retention logs before IT optimized storage. I thought about the 1 a.m. ping from legal asking for temporary access to audit folders and the missing entries the next day. Still, part of me wondered, maybe I should just let it go. Let them win, get my little pension, and buy a used RV like Cheryl from payroll. Spend the rest of my life organizing craft beer coasters by state. But then I remembered something Lexi said during her first all hands. "You can't let the past slow down the velocity of our future." That sentence had always sounded like a threat. So I clicked open the encryption tool I hadn't touched since the IT audit in 2017. Old software, dusty code, still reliable. I started segmenting the files, logs, invoices, scrubbed emails, ghost contractor registrations, all into folders named things like birthday photos and vacation itinerary. I wrapped them in AES 256 like Kevlar. I wrote a README TXT that said only, "If you're reading this, you fed around. Now find out." I slipped the drive back into the lunchbox, but the doubt didn't vanish. It just settled in deeper, like rust in the corners of my mind. Maybe no one would care. Maybe they'd bury it under NDAs and PR jargon. Maybe I'd wake up one day and regret not just walking away with my dignity and a tote bag full of retirement brochures. But fatigue isn't the same as weakness. And doubt doesn't mean surrender. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just didn't want to be a footnote in my own life. It happened on a Wednesday. Gray skies, lukewarm coffee, and the kind of workplace silence that hums like a power line about to snap. I was sorting through my exit checklist, HR's perky little euphemism for inventorying your dignity, when Jordan from CyberSec popped his head over the partition. 24, nervous mustache, always smelled faintly like energy drinks and bad decisions. But smart. Smarter than most of the bobbleheads Lexi imported from her last startup. He leaned in like he was about to confess to a crime. "Hey Marla," he mumbled, eyes scanning the hallway. "You ever notice any files go missing from the shared compliance archive?" I looked up. "Which ones?" He shrugged like someone who knew exactly which ones but had the good sense not to say. "Just whole folders. Vendor logs, Q3 audits, stuff that shouldn't just poof, you know?" I didn't blink. "They poofed?" "Yeah, and the backups are clean too. Too clean. Like freshly pressure-washed clean." He tapped twice on the cubicle wall, a quiet Morse code of "I saw nothing." Walked off like he'd never said a damn thing. Smart kid. I minimized my calendar, opened the company's archive interface, and started poking around. Slowly, like peeling wallpaper in a haunted house, he was right. The files I'd flagged months ago, the ones with inconsistent timestamps and vendor names that didn't match their tax IDs, they were gone. But not deleted. That would have left a trace. These were replaced. Like someone had swapped out the rot with polished veneers. New files, identical names, scrubbed metadata. That's when I stopped breathing for a second. Not because I was scared. No. That was the moment I realized something colder, something sharper had taken root. They were scrubbing the evidence. Not just ignoring it, not just pretending not to see. Deliberately erasing the fingerprints of fraud from every digital surface. That's when the quiet determination slid in. Like an old coat I hadn't worn in years. I'd built this system, watched it grow, watched it become vulnerable, and I knew exactly where the ghosts still lived. I didn't tell Jordan, didn't tell anyone. I logged out, went home sick, and sat down in my dining room, cold tea beside me, cardigan still smelling like copier toner, and connected to the company archive through my VPN. I started the final backup. Not to my work laptop, not to the cloud, to my server, an old, wheezing tower PC that lived under my sideboard and still had a Windows XP sticker like a war medal. 3 hours later, the archive was mine. Not the cleaned-up version, the real one. Every weird invoice, every doctored spreadsheet, every contract routed through Lexi's mystery vendors in Luxembourg and Kuala Lumpur. I split the data into 2 copies. One went into an encrypted partition on the server, locked behind a string of fake birthday photos with an auto trigger if anyone even attempted a brute force attack. The second went on a new USB, fresh out of the packaging. I formatted it twice just to be sure. Then I labeled it with a strip of masking tape and a black Sharpie, insurance. No threats, no manifesto, just one word that said, "Try me." I held it for a long moment. This stupid, plastic thing that suddenly weighed more than the whole damn company. And I walked into my garage, opened the dented metal lunchbox, and nestled the drive between a pair of wrapped napkins and a faded packet of Splenda. Closed the latch. It clicked like a trigger. The backup was done. The seed was planted. All that was left now was to wait. The janitor's name was Curtis, but everyone just called him Sarge. He was one of those guys you never really saw until you did, and then you wondered how the hell you'd missed him all this time. Tall, gray at the temples, moved like he was made of Kevlar and unfinished business. Worked nights mostly, but lately he'd been popping up on the day shift. I noticed him watching the hallway cameras one morning, just for a second too long before giving me a subtle nod. One of those chin tilts that meant you're being watched. I didn't nod back, didn't say a word, just shifted course like I'd meant to turn left all along. That's how it started. Quiet dance in the undercurrent of corporate surveillance. Every day for the rest of that week, Curtis would be mopping exactly where the security cams had blind spots, hallway junctions, copy rooms, supply closets with line of sight to exec offices. He never spoke unless we were alone. And when he did, it was always under his breath, like passing a secret in church. You don't want to take the freight elevator this week, Miss Hayes. Or if you gotta print anything important, don't do it from your desk. Lexi's got IT flagging keystrokes now. He didn't ask what I was doing, just gave me space to do it. And what I was doing, well, it wasn't exactly knitting. I dug into Lexi's procurement records quietly, surgically. I knew the vendor names didn't match, but now I had access to the buried changelogs, edits made in draft mode before final reports were PDF'd and sent to compliance. Turns out, Lexi's digital paper trail was sloppier than her eyeliner. 5 shell companies, all third-party consultants hired for digital risk audits, each registered under a different LLC, but 3 shared an address in Miami tied to a WeWork suite. 2 more funneled through a holding firm in Belize, very chic. Lexi's name never appeared, but her old roommate from grad school, CEO of 2 of the shells, her brother-in-law, COO of another, and the invoices, inflated like parade balloons. One firm charged $38,000 for a threat landscape overview. The actual report, 6 pages of chat GPT boilerplate and a JPEG of a lock. It was too perfect, too greedy, like she never expected anyone to look. I compiled everything, redacted the obvious parts, masked IP logs, blurred names, but left just enough connective tissue for anyone smart enough to pull the thread. Then I sent it, not to a reporter, not to HR, no grand exposé just yet. I emailed it to Elaine Meyerson, my attorney, semi-retired, wore orthopedic heels and once sued a university into the ground for age discrimination. In the subject line, I wrote, for contingency. In the body, just one sentence, if I vanish, send this. Attached, a PDF named Grocery List Final PDF. Then I encrypted the original and scrubbed it from the server like a ghost wiping its own footprints. That night, I passed Curtis near the freight dock. He didn't say a word, just handed me a can of root beer and pointed to a blown fuse box on the security panel. Someone's messing with power distribution, he said, real quiet. Emergency lights failed twice last week. You think that's coincidence? I shook my head. He looked at me then, not like a janitor, like a soldier recognizing another who's still in the fight. Be smart, Marla. They don't play fair when the money's this big. I didn't answer. But I held onto that root beer all the way home like it was some kind of talisman. My hands were shaking just a little, not from fear, from pressure. From the knowledge that the deeper I dug, the fewer exits I'd have. But I wasn't backing out now, because once you see the rot in the foundation, you don't get to pretend the house is safe. You either run or you light the match. They gave me balloons. Balloons. 3 limp helium corpses in the company colors, teal, gray, and HR beige, tied to my cardboard box like a sympathy bouquet for a funeral no one wanted to attend. The string snagged on my coat button as I walked toward the exit for the last time, flanked by 2 security guys who looked like they alternated between guarding C-suite egos and shaking down middle school vape dealers. Lexi stood near the reception desk, arms crossed like a magazine cover, smiling just wide enough to look benevolent in the photos. She'd shown up late to my farewell, of course. Drama queen to the end. Her stilettos echoed across the polished floor as she approached, voice syrupy with that thin layer of corporate poison. Well, she said, tilting her head like I was an injured rescue dog, what can I say? Marla's been part of this ecosystem longer than some of us have been alive. There were a few chuckles. The interns, always the interns. She's been dependable, Lexi went on, letting the word hang like a participation trophy. And while the industry evolves, sometimes it's hard for legacy systems to keep up. But Marla, you've handled this transition with grace. We're all better for your contributions. Grace, that's what they call it when you don't flip a desk on your way out. I smiled, not because I felt gracious, but because I knew something Lexi didn't, something buzzing in my lunchbox like a coiled snake. She reached out for a handshake, all polished nails and pretend sisterhood. I took it. Her grip was soft. Mine wasn't. Then I turned without another word, handed my badge to the front desk, and placed the metal lunchbox on the security table for inspection. Routine. They said protocol, they said. The younger guard popped the latch. Inside, napkins, a bag of trail mix, one outdated granola bar, and centered perfectly like a religious relic, a plain USB drive with masking tape on it. One word in bold, black marker, insurance. His hand hovered. The older guy leaned in, read the label, blinked, and then something shifted. It wasn't fear exactly, but it was the look of someone who knew what it meant to hold something too dangerous to explain. A moment passed. Then he carefully closed the lid and slid the lunchbox back toward me like it might explode. "You're all clear," he said, avoiding eye contact. I nodded, took the box, and walked through the front doors for the last time. Outside, the air tasted like metal and unfinished business. I didn't look back, not once. Let Lexi keep her smirk. Let her think she won. Because the moment that lid closed, the countdown started. The USB wasn't armed, yet, but if anyone tried to copy, open, or decrypt the folder marked Photos 2014, the system I built quietly, patiently would go live. Not a virus, not ransomware. Something cleaner, sharper, disclosure, targeted, timed, irreversible. I walked to my car, the lunchbox clutched to my side like a relic from a long-forgotten war. No speeches, no tears, no drama, just cold satisfaction, and the quiet ticking of consequences. It was 7:16 p.m. when the notification hit. I was halfway through reheating leftover lasagna, my bathrobe still damp from the shower, and a rerun of Frasier whispering in the background like white noise for the emotionally exhausted. My phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time, this one the specific vibration I'd assigned to system alerts. I wiped marinara off my fingers and reached for it. Alert login attempt folder. Photos 2014 location. External IP flagged. Unknown device status. Decryption attempt blocked. My hands didn't shake. Not at first. I set the phone down with a slow exhale and walked over to my desk. The old desktop tower under it, my clunky, buzzing Frankenstein of a machine, whirred to life as if it had been waiting. The script had run, triggered automatically by the unauthorized access, just like I'd planned. 3 seconds later, the secondary monitor lit up with a blinking status bar. Insurance deployment, 11/27 targets. 27, all packets sent. I leaned forward, eyes scanning each name as it blinked green. SEC Office Midwest Division Reuters Ethics Desk ProPublica Secure Upload IG.gov Whistleblower Gateway Anonymous FTP Justice for Contractors Elaine Lawyer Encrypted Inbox Curtis. Yes, I included him. Marine Instinct trumps NDA fear. They were all getting it now. Everything. The emails contained a curated dump, timestamped logs, manipulated contracts, internal Slack captures of Lexi calling one staffer Deadwood and another fertility risk. Each zipped archive was passworded with a time-triggered key that would unlock in 12 hours. Enough time to prepare or flee. I sat down, and then the real flood began. Buzz, Marla, was this you? Buzz, Jesus Christ, you seeing this? Buzz, who the hell leaked the Lexi audits? Buzz, please call me, please. Elaine, my hands were calm, but my chest felt tight, like a vise cranking slow around my ribs. The panic wasn't screaming, it was humming, low and steady like a war drum. Part of me wanted to undo it, pull the plug, say it was a test, a joke, a mistake from a bitter old lady who couldn't handle retirement. But another part, the deeper part, felt alive. Not in a petty, burn it down kind of way. No, more like I told you, I warned you, and you still opened the damn box. At 9:43 p.m., Twitter account I hadn't seen in years at Contractor Hell posted. Tipline just got a dump of something very spicy. Offshore vendors, shell companies, and Lexi vein? Eyes developing. At 10:11, I got a text from an unknown number. We know it was you. You have no idea what you've done. At 10:12, I blocked the number and turned on Frasier again. Let it play. Let it drown out the growing sirens in my skull. Curtis texted me at 10:45. Clean hit. Okay, I replied, still breathing, still watching. Then I went to the kitchen, poured myself a shot of bourbon, and stood at the back door, watching the wind move through the trees. The kind of night that feels like something's coming, but you can't tell if it's salvation or the axe. My thumb hovered over the emergency wipe app for the home server. I didn't press it, because the truth was, I didn't regret a damn thing. They cracked open Pandora's box thinking it was a family photo album. Now let's see how well Lexi handles legacy data. By Monday morning, the whole building was on fire, and not a single flame could be traced back to me. Not literally, of course. No alarms, no sprinklers, just a full-on reputational inferno smoldering behind every glossy executive door. I woke up to the sound of my inbox committing suicide. Over 200 unread. Subject lines like, Media inquiry urgent need comment on Lexi vein investigation SEC response required. 48 HR compliance notice. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I made oatmeal, fed the neighbor's cat while she was at dialysis, and settled into the recliner with the volume off on the morning news. That's where I saw it. First Chiron, breaking. Audit leak exposes fraud at Graviton Systems. SEC reviewing IPO legitimacy. Second, CEO, CTO under review amid vendor kickback allegations. And then, bless it all, third, Lexi vein unavailable for comment. PR team offers no statement. Lexi, unavailable. The woman who'd live tweeted her own root canal, now silent. The influencer CTO who gave keynote speeches about radical transparency, ducking behind lawyers like they were riot shields. The press called it unverified leaks. The forums called it whistleblowing. One Reddit thread named it the Marla Protocol even though I'd never given a name. Didn't matter. My fingerprints weren't on any of it. My name was nowhere, but my code was, my folders, my digital breadcrumbs. I was invisible but omnipresent. Every file that surfaced, every memo that leaked, every time-stamped audit trail that didn't line up with official reports, it all screamed, someone saw you. Lexi's C-suite friends sent a company-wide email that morning titled, clarifying narrative around recent disclosures. They should have titled it, shit, she had backups. Inside, jittery legalese trying to downplay an internal miscommunication regarding third-party vendors. It was like watching someone try to tape a cracked dam with gum and good intentions. Within hours, a second email leaked, this one internal, full of frantic back and forth between execs. Why wasn't this flagged sooner? We scrubbed those files, I swear. We need to reach out to legacy staff who had access to root before the migration. Do not put anything else in writing. Call only. I read that one twice just to savor the panic. That afternoon, I went into town for groceries. No one recognized me, just another quiet woman buying freezer peas and instant coffee. But behind the sunglasses, I was electric, because for once the gaslight had turned in my direction and they were the ones choking on it. One headline on my phone read, Decade of Deception? Former employees' archive may rewrite Graviton's financial history. Damn right it might. For years I'd been told, Marla, you're being dramatic. Marla, that's not your concern. Marla, we've got protocols for this. Turns out their protocol was fraud and their concern was getting caught. And now the IPO was under review, Lexi had gone dark, and 3 of her inner circle resigned to pursue other opportunities before noon. My neighbor's cat pawed at my leg while I read a private Slack leak on an anonymous whistleblower board. Anyone know who did this? CFO says we've got a Judas in the walls. Not Judas, sweetheart, Justice. Served cold in 32 encrypted parts. And I hadn't even poured the second cup of coffee yet. By Tuesday, whispers had turned into screams. Whistleblower forums lit up like a Vegas marquee, each thread crawling with conspiracy sleuths, bitter ex-employees, and armchair compliance officers pulling on strings they didn't even know were connected. Some called it Operation Fossil Fuel, others dubbed it Lunchboxgate. One anonymous user claimed the files came from a legacy mole embedded since the Bush administration. Another theorized it was an AI whistleblower that had gained sentience and snapped. I read them all from my tablet, legs curled under me on the couch, my lunchbox now holding nothing but trail mix and an old receipt from CVS. The USB was in a locked drawer, the backup server offline and wrapped in tinfoil just in case. At 1:04 p.m. my phone rang. Private number. I didn't pick up. It rang again. Then a text came in from Carla. Used to be in payroll, left last year after they froze her bonus for budget optimization. We hadn't spoken since her going away cupcakes. Marla, holy shit. Please call me. Against my better judgment, I did. She picked up mid-sob. They fired Alan and Priya. Fired, not reassigned. Just gone, no goodbye emails. They wiped their internal profiles like they never existed. I stayed silent. And the IPO's off, delayed until further notice. Rumor is Lexi's being subpoenaed. Jesus, I didn't believe it was you at first. But now? It had to be, right? I still didn't say anything. Thank you, she said, voice cracking. Even if you don't admit it, just thank you. Then she hung up. I stared at the screen, not moving. Alan and Priya were Lexi's right and left hands. They'd smiled through every ethics meeting like it was theater. Pushed her shell vendors. Rejected every flagged report I ever submitted. Now they were corporate ghosts, vaporized in the wake of exposure. At 3:27 p.m., CNBC ran a segment titled, Investor Exodus, Graviton's largest stakeholder withdraws over ethical instability. The clip showed a grim-faced man in a blue tie, muttering about fiduciary responsibility and compliance culture failure. His words were dry, but his money was loud. When he bailed, others followed. Fast. At 4:02 p.m., leaked congressional memos surfaced. Preliminary inquiry opened into Graviton Systems' financial irregularities and potential age discrimination practices. I stared at that line until my eyes burned. Age discrimination. That was the part I hadn't even planned. That was just the rot seeping out from behind the walls. The casual cruelty, the digitally native crap, the way Lexi giggled when she called HR policies boomer bloat. Now someone in DC was listening. It should have felt like a victory lap, but instead it felt like grief. Not for them, not for the IPO, for me. For every year I'd sat in that cubicle swallowing my instincts. For every time I flagged something and got a sticker or a smile or once a demotion. For every late night I stayed back to fix someone else's laziness, only to be labeled unscalable. The catharsis didn't come with fireworks, it came with stillness. I sat there, in a house that still smelled like lavender cleaner and loneliness, and thought about how much I'd traded for the illusion of stability. The collapse had begun. And yeah, I'd lit the fuse, but I'd also built the scaffolding they'd used to climb so high. That was the hardest part to swallow, not the betrayal, the waste. The email came at 6:42 a.m. on Friday. Subject line, Final departure review confirmation required body. Hi, Marla. Just doing a last sweep of records and inventory. Quick question, wanted to confirm that you didn't leave behind any personal items or hardware. Just in case. Thanks, Jared, security operations. I stared at it while stirring cream into my coffee. No greeting, no signature block, just that passive-aggressive whiff of we're onto you but we have no proof. I hit reply. Typed a single character, smiling face with smiling eyes hit send, and I deleted the thread. And that was that. By noon, every major outlet had picked it up. Whistleblower leak uncovers Graviton's systemic age discrimination practices former CTO subpoenaed in fraud ethics scandal. Class action brewing SEC investigates Graviton IPO integrity after document dump triggers oversight review turns out it wasn't just shell companies and fake audits. It was patterns. Patterns buried in promotion data, raised deferrals, demotions rebranded as reskilling initiatives. Over 40 former employees aged 50 plus had been tagged unscalable in HR documentation going back 6 years. Some were already organizing. One even reached out through a burner account, we're forming a class. If you ever want to join, doors open. You did this. You gave us air. I didn't respond. I wasn't in this for the banner or the rally cry. That fight belonged to them now. Mine was over. The next day, I drove 3 hours out of the city to the cabin I hadn't visited in nearly a decade. My dad built it in the 70s, back when walls were paneled and a radio counted as luxury tech. I opened the windows, let the lake air roll through, and sat on the porch as the sun dragged its feet toward the tree line. The lunchbox sat next to me on the wicker table. Same dented lid, same click when I opened it, but the contents had changed. No USB, no bait, no threat, just a paper envelope full of wildflower seeds I'd picked up from the co-op in town. I ran them between my fingers, dusty and alive with possibility. No one would be emailing me anymore. No more Slack pings. No calendar invites or mandatory webinars about postmodern leadership paradigms. Lexi would face a hearing. Her carefully curated TED talk life was collapsing, and I didn't feel pity. But I didn't feel vengeance either. Just peace. The kind you earn, the kind they never expected someone like me to find. I sipped my coffee, real cream this time, none of that corporate powdered crap, and watched a crane circle the lake. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't forgiven. And I sure as hell wasn't sorry. But I was finally free. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.